Hi, algebra students. If you missed class on Friday, October the 23rd, this is the video you should be watching. Okay, you will need your journal for some notes, and there is a Pear Deck for you to join under T2 Week 1. Today's date 10/23, and the name is Graphing Equations and Inequalities. Okay, so the Pear Deck you should be joining is right here under T2 Week 1. Click on today's date, Graphing Equations and Inequalities. Click on Sign In, and it takes you directly to your Pear Deck. Okay, once you get into the Pear Deck, the first slide you should be seeing is a question from our Unit 2 test. Okay, the first two slides are problems that we completed on our Unit 2 test. So we did these two as warm-up. I'm going to quickly go through them. If you still need help with them after this video, please make sure that you reach out to me or you attend tutoring on Wednesday or Friday from 2 to 3:30. Okay, so in looking at this problem, right, they give me a word problem. I'm going to go to my question and see what they're asking me to do. Okay, what is the range of the function for this situation? So I'm going to underline range. So I know that I'm looking for the y value, right? I'm looking for the y. So I know that because range is y, I can cross out two answer choices. A, because it's an x, and I can cross out C because it's an x. Okay, remember domain are the x values. Okay, I skipped over steps, but you should definitely follow your checklist, right? The checklist that we use to determine domain and range from real world problems. Okay, so you should read your problem carefully. Okay, then you've got to organize your information, right, based on what they gave us. So if I want to identify what the y values are, okay, if I look in my word problem, I can see that the daily cost of hiring a plumber is the y. So next to y, I'm going to type cost, or you can write daily cost, or you can write price, right? However you're going to remember or organize what they gave you. Okay, so then my x talks about the hours, right? X hours. I'm going to type hours next to that. So if I'm trying to organize this, right, the best way to organize would be to put it in a table, right? So if I said X and Y, right? Okay, then it tells me the fixed cost of $80 plus an additional cost of $45 per hour. Okay, the plumber works a maximum of 8 hours per day. So if he works 0 hours, right? He hasn't started working yet. The fixed cost, right, of him just showing up is $80, right? That's the fixed amount. So before any hours have passed, right, he has already earned $80 just by showing up. Okay? After one day, right, 8 hours. So one day, remember, 8 hours. He's going to get $440. Okay, because he worked those 8 hours times $45, which gives me $360, plus the 80. Don't forget to add those $80 in there. Okay, so if we look at our y values, right, our y values range from 80 to 440, right? Since we're talking about money, we need to make sure that we include those inequality symbols because money can be counted in parts, right? So the reason why it is B and not D is because even though he doesn't work any hours, right, before the hours start passing, he already starts with $80. Okay, the 45 is not correct because he's got to work at least 1 hour before he can get that $45. Okay, if we move on to question 2, the key word in this question, right, is rate of change. If you remember, rate of change is another name for slope, right? So if you use your slope formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, right? I'm writing this for you because it can be found on your star chart. It is not something that you have to memorize, okay? What you do have to remember is when you're selecting points from the table, you need 2 different points, okay? And you have to remember that this is my x side, this is my y side. If you happen to forget, remember the table labels it for us up at the top, okay? And another thing you need to pay attention to when you're plugging them into our formula, right? If you start with this y, you need to start with this x on the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to start with the top y just because I see it first. So I'm going to say 96 minus 60, because those are both my y values, right? Y, y. You could label y1 and y2 if you want. Over, because I started with 96, I have to start with negative 20 on the bottom. Negative 20 minus, because my formula tells me to subtract, right? A negative 12. Notice how I did double negative right here because the number I'm plugging in is a negative. So this would change to a plus sign. So on the top, if I subtract, I get 36 over a negative 8, right? So I can cross out 2 answer choices right off the bat because I know that my slope is going to be negative. So I can cross out G and I can cross out J. So if I simplify my fraction, I am left with a negative 9 over 2, and I know that is my correct answer. If you skip ahead to slide 5, okay, we did a recap before we took some notes. So in recapping what we learned last class, right, slope is the circle, that is the number that is paired with the variable. Intercept is our B, it is the one that we box, right? We put that one in a box with the symbol. So if it's a plus, make sure you put it in there. If it's a minus, make sure you put it with it, because that determines where we start on the y-intercept, the y-axis. It's our y-intercept, we find it on the y-axis. So my B is where I'm going to start first. It's a positive 5, so I find positive 5 on my y-axis. Okay, and then rise over run tells me rise 1, run 2. Because my slope is positive, I'm going in the positive direction 1 time up, and then I'm running 2 times to the right, and I put my next point. I'm going to repeat it so that my line is straighter. Rise 1, run 2. Rise 1, run 2. Rise 1, run 2. Okay, and then what I'm going to do now is I'm going to connect them with a line. So if you use the line feature, right, it allows you to draw through your points and try to make your line go through your graph. Okay, so the slide after this is like the one that we just did. Remember, if your slope is negative, that means that you count down for your rise. So instead of starting at -2 and counting up 2, we would start at -2 and count down 2. Okay? These two right here, you are graphing the inequality on a number line. Remember to pay close attention to your symbol, right? If it has a line underneath your inequality symbol, remember that's a solid circle. If it does not have a line underneath, remember that is an open circle. You do not have to complete slide number 8. If you go back to slide number 3, it tells you we're going to take some notes. So let's go ahead and get our journals ready. You can pause the video. Do not move on to slide number 9 until after you take your notes. Okay, so our title for today was Graphing Inequalities. Okay, we recalled some things that we've already worked on. So the first thing that we recalled was solving for x. Remember, those were the equations where we were solving for whatever variable was in the problem, and our final answer would look like something like this, where x was equal to 5. So on a number line, if we put that right, we would have a number line with a point on whatever number was our answer, our solution, right? And that was it. Okay. The next thing we worked on was solving for x. Now we added inequality symbols, right? Remember, those were the symbols that were greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. Remember, our answers involve the inequality symbol, right? And then on the number line this time, our circles were either open or closed, and then the shading depended on the direction that my inequality symbol was facing. Okay. So the only difference between an equation and an inequality, right, was that we added some shade on the picture now. Okay. So then we moved on to linear equations, right, where they were starting looking like this. Y equals mx plus b, where m was my slope and the b was my intercept. So remember, we started by plotting our b, then we did rise and run to get a new point. Once we had a few points, right, because we could do it again and again, we would draw a line through it. And that's what we had started with. Now what we're moving to are graphing inequalities, right? So they're still kind of set up the same way. We've got a slope, we've got an intercept, except now instead of an equal sign, they've got an inequality symbol. So remember, it can be either of those 4 symbols, greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. Okay, so now this time we're still plotting our b. We're still doing rise and run to get new points. Rise and run for new points. So what matters now is how we connect them. Okay, if it does not have a line underneath, we're going to connect them using a dotted or a dashed line. I interchange those words sometimes, either dotted or dashed. Okay, so now it's going to matter what symbol we have to determine the type of line that we're going to have. Okay, so if we remember, with an open circle, we've got our symbols that do not have a line underneath. Those are going to connect our points with a dotted or a dashed line. And then if you've got the closed circle or the inequality symbols that have or equal to underneath, that's a solid line connecting your points. And then all we have left to do now is the shading part. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and stop the video here. The next part of the video will give you your checklist and an example of graphing an inequality.